This here is the GWM Ora GT, and in this review we're going for a road trip all the way from here in Glenbrook in the lower Blue Mountains to Cooma in the Snowy Mountains. It's a family road trip. I'm going to load up my dogs, my daughter, and a whole bunch of stuff in the boot if it'll fit, and there's a lot more to cover in this review. This is the high-spec version of the Ora, so is it worth your money? Let's go for a drive and find out, and if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Let's go! Righto, so I've just left for this 400k road trip, and conveniently I've got 402 kilometers of EV driving range to get me to where I need to go. That's one thing you need to know about this version of the Ora. It does have slightly less range than the extended range version that it's based on, because it's got different wheels and tires, different aerodynamics, so a bit less EV driving range. But if you want a bit more range, then the extended range version is cheaper and also offers you that convenience. Now, speaking of price, let's go through what you're getting to separate the GT from the other versions in this range. Obviously, you're getting that sporty body kit with the more leery looking alloy wheels and different front and rear bumper finishes as well. And on the inside, you do get some nice finishes too. You've got this lovely red and black theme that continues on the seats, on the steering wheel, across the dashboard, and it looks and feels pretty good. You got a pair of digital screens for the driver as well. One is your driver info screen, the other one is your infotainment screen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as well. All right, so we're gonna hit the road. I think that the price is maybe a little bit ambitious because you're not getting any extra performance for the GT version of this car. In fact, that's a pretty good starting point for the driving section of this review. So let's talk about it. Yep, we'll do driving first because it does have the GT badge attached to it. GT typically should indicate that you're getting the sportiest version of a car that you can. In the instance of the Ora, no, it's no sportier, it just looks sportier. So it's more like a GT line, in my opinion, or not even that. So it doesn't necessarily have any differentiating factor in terms of the drive experience. Surprisingly, it's the slowest of the entire range. 8.5 seconds 0 to 100 means it's 1/10 of a second slower than the other versions of this car with this battery pack. Surprising. So we're making our way onto the Great Western Highway now. And look, I've spent a couple of days in this car already, and there's some things that I tend to turn off every single time I drive it, including this little driver monitoring camera system, which I find to be a little bit annoying because it tends to say that you're not paying attention when you are. And there's also an active lane keeping or emergency lane keeping system that activates every time you drive the car. And what that does is push you around in your lane to a point where it actually feels like it's trying to take control from you. And I don't really like that. I'm a bit of a control freak. So those elements, not ideal, I would say. Look, it's pushing me around a little bit already. And while they have been fine-tuned in recent times compared to the original versions, still not the most nuanced attempt at lane keeping, I would say. Now, going back to what I was saying before, the GWM Ora GT doesn't have any extra power or torque compared to the other versions in this lineup. So I guess that's a little bit disappointing because a car that costs this much more really probably should have a bit more grunt, just to match up to its looks at least. But I don't think that it's a deal breaker. It's more of a styling exercise than anything else. And you do have enough power and torque in this car to really zip along quite nicely. In fact, I think it's a pretty enjoyable drive experience on the whole. In terms of the acceleration, you do have a couple of different drive modes you can choose from, and they make a funny noise when you press the button. So auto, normal, sport, and eco. For this drive, I'm just going to stick in auto as much as possible. I might duck into eco mode if I feel like the range is getting low. The WLTP rated range for this car, which you'll see on your screen right now, is actually pretty good. And I think that it's also, what's that? Up the bunnies. Now, for those playing along at home, I am going along the Northern Road rather than the M7 to head south towards Canberra and then Cooma. The reason for that is that this is an 80k an hour zone, and for the most part, sometimes 70, sometimes less. But the idea is that I do have more potential to regain energy along the way if I have to stop at traffic lights or something like that, rather than trying to push through the air at 100 k's or 110 k's an hour for the entire time on this road trip. Those little things you do think of more and more when you are driving an EV, because every kilometre of driving range counts, and we'll have to see later on whether we end up running low on range. I do have in the back of my mind a couple of spots along the way where we might need to top up some charge if we are looking low on the range meter, but we'll have to just wait and see what happens. I'm going to sit it in cruise control as well for the most part of this trip, just to try and use the powertrain as most efficiently as possible. The driving experience is actually really quite nice in this car. The thing that's most impressed me is the ride quality and the comfort. It does have a really well sorted suspension setup for a car of this size. It drives along and handles bumps really, really well at lower speeds and at higher speeds as well. It doesn't really get bumped around too much. It's got a solid feel on the road. It feels like it's quite planted, and it does have quite a wide track as well. So it does have that settled on the road feel, and it does corner pretty well as well when you go through twisty sections. So for the most part, in urban driving situations, it's a very amenable car, but this test is all about trying to see what sort of efficiency we can get out of this electric motor and battery pack, what sort of range we will achieve, and also what it's like at higher speeds on the highway in terms of comfort and I guess the levels of isolation from the elements that you get in this car. Now, just for posterity's sake, in this test, I haven't actually turned off any of the safety systems. I've just left everything on as it would be. So far, so good. Right, I'm going to do a bit of driving and maybe entertain my child and dogs for a little bit, and then I'll come back to you just like that. We get some weird beeps. I think that was lane keeping, even though I'm directly in the middle of my lane. Don't know why it would do that. Anyway, I'll come back to you later and let you know if there's been any more annoying stuff like that. Okay, it's about 2 minutes after I last spoke to you, and I'm going to turn off the lane keeping system because it's pushing me around on these slight curves to a point where I keep having to really correct it. So yep, I'm turning that off now. Rightio, so if you're looking for a compact, pretty affordable electric hatchback, you do have some really, really good options available to you. The first one I would definitely recommend you check out is the MG4. It's my favorite small electric car because it's so much fun to drive. It's rear wheel drive, unlike this model, which is front wheel drive, and unlike lots of the other ones, which are front wheel drive. So it does have a different level of dynamism and excitement to the drive experience. And if that matters to you, you should definitely go and test drive an MG4. But if you don't care, I totally understand that as well. Now, you might also want to take a look at the BYD Dolphin. I've done a review of it too, and for the money, I think that you're getting a fair bit of wow factor in that car, and it really does seem to be a great little thing for those who are just going to be living urban and just doing the urban driving thing. It might be perfectly fine. The tires are really bad on that car as standard, so I would recommend you upgrade to a better set of tires straight away, whether you live urban or not. But it's not necessarily an excitement machine in the corners, but I guess it's not supposed to be. It's not really trying to be. But if you do want a little bit more excitement and your budget can stretch a little higher, then you should go and check out a Cupra Born as well. At about 60 grand with more than 500 Ks of EV driving range, the Cupra Born does have some seriously enjoyable driving dynamics to it. It's rear wheel drive as well. It's got a tall body, but it sits low on the ground, and it has a really nice level of enjoyment and drive factor to it. And I think it's a really underrated EV in the segment, but it is a price peg or two higher than this. And I mean, if this is pushing your budget, then I reckon you could actually look at one of the lower spec versions of this, because I think that even the standard range one, which only has a claimed range of about 310 Ks, it's a good car to drive and a pretty nice car to live with. And there's deals being done at about 35 grand drive away. So yeah, if you want to save a bit of money, maybe go for the entry-level standard range version of the Ora, or one of those other ones I mentioned, or something completely different. Let me know what you would pick in the comments section below. Right, so when you're doing an EV road trip, you want to keep in mind that you might have different gradients that you're climbing or descending, which could really drastically affect the EV driving range available to you, because it affects the efficiency. The electric motor has to work harder if you're going uphill, for instance, and the regenerative braking can work better if you're doing a long downhill stint. If you are constantly going uphill, you're not going to see as good a range figure as you would if you were driving on the flat or if you were driving downhill for the majority of your trip. So for context, I'm going to put at the end of this video what I achieved on the way back home in terms of efficiency and range when I leave from Cooma to go back home, but I'm just covering this trip on the way to Cooma as part of this review. Now, if you've watched my other GWM Ora review, you'll probably know that one of my big criticisms with this car is the boot space. Now, I'm going to show you a time lapse of me trying to pack the boot in this car before I left, because it is very, very small. It's a shallow boot. Because of the clamshell design of the tailgate, it really does mean that you've only got sort of a small section of the boot to use as well. Some other cars that are boxier hatchbacks tend to have a little bit more usable space available to you, but it's certainly compact when it comes to the boot dimensions, and I did manage to fit everything in. I had to put some stuff in the back seat, so I've got my daughter's stroller behind the passenger seat, and I've also got my suitcase behind the driver's seat. So it's definitely something you need to keep in mind with this car. It's not as roomy as some of the other smaller EV hatchbacks out there when it comes to boot capacity. I reckon a set of roof racks and a really aerodynamically designed roof box could be a cool modification for this car though. Or just don't have kids or dogs. But let me go into a little bit more detail about this interior. I think that the space on offer in here is really, really good, apart from the boot space, obviously. It's a very open and airy feeling cabin. Like, I feel like I've got a lot of headroom above me. There's a lot of space across the width of the cabin, and there's plenty of second row space as well. Now, my daughter has so much room back there that she can't kick the seat ahead, and I've got this seat set forward a little bit so I could fit her stroller in behind it. But it does have enough space for 4 adults to fit comfortably, and maybe even 5 if you needed to, because it's a pretty broad car too. But it does have some shortcomings when it comes to the practicality in the car. So I've got my little keep cup here, and this cup holder, it actually shows at the bottom of it, it's not a cup holder, it's designed to hold a bottle. So there is no designed cup holders in the front of this car, which is a bit annoying if you like having a coffee when you're driving. It also feels airy in here because of this big panoramic glass roof, which you can open if you want to, and it's got a nice light headliner as well. All of those things combine to make this feel like a really spacious and really airy cabin. And you know, if you've watched any of my other reviews, I hate dark headliners, and thankfully this one doesn't have one. Very nice. They could easily have done it for the GT version too. Okay, there's one other thing I wanted to call out. It has been in the high 20 degrees Celsius range today, so a pretty warm April day, and the sunroof glass has been exposed the whole time. There are no rear air vents in this car, and I would always recommend having a car with rear air vents, but I haven't really had any issues with it being too hot in the back. I've had the aircon set to a range of between 21 and 22.5 degrees for this whole trip, and I'm not going to turn it off to save range on a warm day. And my daughter and the dogs in the back seem to have been pretty comfortable. Not too hot, thankfully, as has been the case in some other cars in the past with no rear air vents. So it's a pretty big cabin for the size of the car, but the air seems to flow around it pretty well. So that's just one other thing I wanted to add. But there is one other thing that I don't like, it's that there's no outside temperature display on the screen. That's a little bit annoying because I like to know what temperature it is wherever I drive, because I'm one of those people. Just to update you on the range situation, I've used 100 Ks of EV range, but I've only covered 90 kilometers. So we'll have to wait and see if we remain true to that sort of calculation. If we do, we're going to run out of EV range before we get to Kuma, but I will obviously preempt that and charge well before we get to where we're going and top things up. Probably need a break about halfway with this in the background anyway. So just thought I'd let you know when the next 100 Ks of range disappears, I'll update you again. All right, let's talk about battery specs for the Ora GT. Now it runs essentially the extended range battery pack. So it's the 63 kilowatt hour battery that is also found in the extended range version of the Ora. And that is an NMC ternary lithium ion battery system. So it's a little bit different to some other vehicles out there in terms of the battery chemistry, and it's actually not like an LFP blade battery that you'd find in a BYD. That means that you can't take it to 100% constantly without degrading the battery. Okay, so a bit of an update on the range situation. I'm down to 200 Ks of range, which is 200 less than what I started with, and I'm not quite halfway. In fact, that last 100 Ks of range, I only did 80 kilometers of distance. So if you want to be cautious, you can probably take away about 20 kilometers of range for every 100 that is indicated, and you should, in theory, be able to do the maths and figure out where you should stop or how far you can go without needing to stop. Now, speaking of stopping, we are about to. It's lunchtime, we're outside Goulburn, and it's time to get this kid and these dogs out and go for a walk while we charge up. And I'm going to tell you about the charging specs in a sec. So, heading off to the Goulburn South exit now to see if we can find a charging station. There are a few chargers around this neck of the woods, but it is lunchtime. It is the Easter long weekend, and there are more and more EVs on the road. So let's see what we can find. Hopefully we can get a charging spot. This is one of the problems with electric vehicle ownership currently, is that there aren't that many spots to stop and charge. And I mean, you look at how many cars there are around right now. There's literally thousands of cars in Goulburn trying to fuel up, get lunch, whatever it may be. And in this neck of the woods, there's 2 chargers. Really? The infrastructure situation is what might stop you actually choosing an electric car right now, because it's certainly not ideal. Rightio, after that failed attempt to go and have a charging stop and a quick nappy change, not for me, and also a couple of angry looks from the dogs because they didn't get to go out and go for a walk. But we're back on the road. We're going to go to Canberra instead to find somewhere to charge and get some lunch. Like I said, this is the reality of the situation with EV life right now. There just aren't enough charging stations around Australia to make this a viable road trip option if you do tend to do most of your road trips on public holiday weekends like I do. So, yep, not ideal, but we'll forge ahead, get somewhere else instead. 176 Ks of range remaining, easily within distance to get to Canberra. So I'll update you when we're a bit closer. Now, I'm not going to go through too much detail on the safety technology and equipment, but just know that this car does have a 5-star ANCAP safety rating, and it's got all the stuff that you would expect, including autonomous emergency braking. There's lane keeping, as I've mentioned, with emergency lane keeping, which is annoying, a driver monitoring camera, which I turn off, and you've also got blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert as well, parking sensors and a surround view camera. So it does have all the safety stuff that you would expect of a modern day car that can achieve a 5-star rating. And it's also got a fair few airbags for a little tiny car as well. 7, in fact. All right, let's talk about ownership things. So it does have a pretty impressive ownership offering, I have to say. 7-year unlimited kilometer warranty for the car, an 8-year unlimited kilometer warranty for the battery pack, which is excellent. And there's a 5-year roadside assist plan and 5 years of cap price servicing. And the services, well, they're every 12 months and 15,000 kilometers, which is on par with most others, but some have longer intervals because they're electric and you don't actually need to see a maintenance person that often. But keep in mind that those services are capped at $99 each, so it's hardly a big ask when it comes to maintaining this car. And I mean, there's not many moving parts, so it shouldn't cost too much to maintain. But even so, I think that that's a pretty compelling argument to consider this car if you are in the market for a small EV. So just pulled up at the EV station here, wherever we are in Canberra, and now to figure out how to charge. So DC charging, plug it in. It's very awkward to do one-handed when you're trying to film. Okay, successful. Now I've just got to figure out on the app how to get it to work. Just one sec. I think I've managed to get it to go. I'm just waiting for it to actually kick into life. Plugged in. Here we go. We're off. So this is a 75 kilowatt charger, and it should be able to use max capacity almost while we're here. So there you go. You can actually feel good about yourself. Do some exercise while you're waiting for your car to charge. Glass half full, right? Righto, so while it is charging, I'll tell you that you've got an AC charge rate of 11 kilowatts for the GWM Ora and a DC charge rate of 80 kilowatts, but that should mean a pretty quick charge time. I'll put some times on your screen now so you can see how long you might be up for when it comes to charging this car on the fast charger, and also what it's like when you're charging at home. But hey, it's actually almost done, so I'm going to hit the road and continue on to Cooma. One other thing, I did charge this car before I left home, a full charge overnight, but I couldn't set a charge timer. I can't find a way to do that through this screen, because that's one of the convenience features of having an EV, is to be able to just drive into your driveway, plug it in, and know that it won't start charging until it's going to be the most efficient and effective for the car itself to recharge and for your wallet. So yeah, a little bit disappointing that. So we've arrived in Cooma, the gateway to the occasionally snowy mountains. If you're wondering why we're going to Cooma, it's because it's where my family's from. I'm from Cooma originally, and so we're heading down to see the fam for a couple of days. Now, for efficiency, I'm going to put the WLTP stated claim on the screen now so you can see what it should be able to achieve in terms of kilowatt hours per 100 Ks. Remember, it's just like petrol or diesel, the lower the number the better. And if you're wondering what I've seen over very, very close to 400 Ks of driving today, you'll see that on your screen now. And I think that's not too bad. It's not necessarily super duper efficient, and obviously we did have to stop and charge, but I think this car for open road driving is still pretty impressive. Like I say in pretty much every EV review I do, the more that you drive urban, the better it will be in terms of efficiency, because you'll be on the regen brakes a lot more and actually replenishing the battery more. Open road driving for EVs, it's not really their deal, but still, I'm impressed with what I've seen today. I hope you enjoyed this review. The GWM Ora GT is a very, very good road trip companion, apart from the fact that it does overestimate how much range you've got available, especially if you're going on hilly terrain. But tell me what you think about this car in the comments section below. Do you think it's worth the extra money? I don't think I'd personally recommend that you spend so much more to get this version. I think that the lower spec versions of the Ora still stack up pretty well, but I do like the look of it. Tell me what you reckon. I'd love to hear from you, and let me know if you want to see more road trip content. Where should I go next? I've got a few ideas for a few videos coming up soon, and if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. See you in the next one.